Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Radnor Township School District Curriculum Committee meeting for the month of April. First item on our agenda is introductions and administrative remarks.
Okay, thank you. So we have a little bit of a change to our agenda for tonight. Our speaker, Chris Massaro, who was going to talk about internships at the high school, is unable to be with us tonight, but we have rescheduled him for next month, so we can cross that item from our agenda tonight. We will be, however, be getting a Math and Focus update from Dr. Kelly Murray, so we can look forward to that. I do have several announcements tonight. You know, it's the spring. There's a lot of exciting things going on. The STEAM in the summer camp for the middle school students is now full with 48 registrants at the middle school. The summer reading program, we've sent out 143 invitations to our students between kindergarten and third grade, so we're looking forward to hearing back from parents to confirm the attendance of those students. And for our summer English language learner program, we've invited 90 students, which of course does not include the influx of students that we get during the summer who join the district as new English language learners. So we'll be sending out those invites, and then we usually pick up another 12 to 16 over the summer. Elementary STEM night is this week, always a highly anticipated event. An hour ago, it was full at 525 students registered, but Kelly has opened up 25 more coveted spots. So for folks who haven't registered, there's still an opportunity to get a few more students involved in that evening, and that's this Thursday, and it's going to start at 6:30. I wanted to mention a little bit about PSLA, the Pennsylvania Librarians Association. We talked last month a little bit about our library programs, and we've seen our librarians here a few times. This month was the Pennsylvania Library Association Conference, and as you know, our librarians are very, very active. And I just wanted to mention that we were represented at two different presentations. Stephanie Crean from Ithan Elementary School and also Catherine Horan from Radnor Middle School did a presentation on using apps and databases to bring choice to research. And Sue Dahlstrom and I did a presentation with the public library, which was called Libraries 365. It was about how to work with your public library to have library and literacy events happening throughout the school year and throughout the day. And I know we've talked a lot about the challenges we faced when the public library building closed. We've had to share some space, but it's really been a great opportunity to work together and to come up with some really innovative programs. The other thing is PSLA also has a Regional Leaders Academy, and we had our third librarian graduate. We are now the only district in the state of Pennsylvania that has librarians at each level that has completed the leadership program. So Esther Purnell came up to be part of the process when Catherine finished up last week, so it was very exciting for them. And most exciting of all, one of the very popular events over 500 librarians attend when they present the Pennsylvania Young Reader's Choice Award. And the author, Peter Raimondo, who wrote the book The Monkey Goes Bananas, was the recipient this year. And it was actually our Radnor students that had the honor to present the award. So you'll see here a picture of two of our students from Wayne Elementary School. And one of them did the talking, and the other one presented the awards, and they had a cute little skit together, and then they were able to eat lunch or breakfast with the author that morning. So it was really, really exciting, and they did a fantastic job. Their families traveled all the way to Hershey and brought them along and stayed overnight, and it was really a lot of fun for the whole group. And then lastly, I wanted to mention that in front of you today you have a copy of The Innovator's Mindset, a book by George Corus. George Corus is going to be a speaker for us in the Radnor Township School District on August 30th. We're actually sharing him with the Garnet Valley School District. He'll be with us in the morning, and he will be with Garnet Valley in the afternoon. And starting last week, our teachers received copies of the books, and they are reading them and participating in a book study. So I wanted to give you a copy to you so that you could follow along as we work through the information around George and innovation. So you'll be hearing more about that as we get into our planning for next year. And a full agenda for next month. We will have Chris out next month, and he's going to talk about internships at the high school. We are going to have the Riverkeeper here to talk about the Eco Garden at Ithan Elementary School. Esther Purnell is going to be here to talk about a minimally revised bell schedule. I think you'll remember last year when we looked at the middle school schedule, we said that the components, we were very confident in the components, but that it was possible we would be coming back feedback to maybe revise the order a little bit. So we'll have some final recommendations on what that order might look like next month. And then Mr. Kearney next month is going to talk about some materials adoptions for K-7 music. All right.
On the bell schedule
Yes.
thing, so am I right to assume then that you'll be bringing back to us not only recommendations for changes, but what your findings were over this year? So a backward-looking postmortem on it and what's driving those changes?
What's driving the changes?
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, first of all, thank you so much for our very own copy of the
Welcome.
book. I really appreciate that. And I just want to note, too, that Sue Dahlstrom, our wonderful librarian, presented me, I guess, the rest of the committee, I'm assuming she sent us a lovely thank you note for sponsoring them to go to that conference. So I just want to recognize Sue.
Yeah, that's nice.
She's so gracious.
And they really make the most of it when they're there. I mean, they are in sessions and networking from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, and every one of them is very, very involved with their professional organization. So it's great to see.
Yeah, it's a win-win for everybody. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item on our agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Hi, hi, Debbie.
Okay. Yes, I'm here, Debbie Singer, Villanova. I signed in. I'm here on behalf of Radnor Page with a couple of questions and some information that I want to give to you. So our questions are, with another budget cycle well underway, has the board had an opportunity to look at the effects of the cuts that were made at both the middle school and the high school? Has the board been able to more strategically plan for the coming year, ensuring that any changes that are made are done with an eye to at least maintaining the strength of our curriculum? Additionally, Radnor Page has concerns about large class size at RMS and RHS. Last year, at this time, if you remember, the word was out that they plan to increase size of pre-calculus class from approximately 14 to 30 or so. Many parents came out and gave public comment, and the high school kept the class size to 14. Thanks very much. So it's important that we ask if they plan to keep the pre-calculus class size to a similar size of about 14 this year, because that size works well in what is called the hardest math class in the high school. So we're just wondering if the board is ensuring that we are going to be consistently adhering to district class sizes across the board guidelines. Okay, then I have information. So Radnor Page is sponsoring a speaker on March 10th. Her name is Dr. Allison Mackey. She's a cognitive neuroscientist from the University of Pennsylvania, and she is going to be talking about supporting your child's optimal brain development. What environmental factors affect academic success and learning, what factors can impair learning and attention, how are motivation and learning connected, how can a growth mindset improve academic performance, what does cognitive neuroscience tell us about effective learning strategies. This is going to be at 7:30 at Radnor Elementary. And at 6:30, Paige will have our business meeting, and then at 7, Jim will be there to talk to parents about gifted education in Radnor. I also want to report that the college workshops with Sigisvani for 4 Sundays are completed, and we had 75 to 100 people each session. So it's very well attended and very well appreciated. Thank you.
I just want to give you some feedback about that
Sure.
series of 4, I guess they were sessions.
Yeah.
I ran into somebody not from the county, but not necessarily not from Radnor, who found out I was from Radnor and mentioned that they had gone to those, and they were the most fantastic presentations, and they were so incredibly impressed that you pulled that together again.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I know you've
He's-
had it for a number of years, so you are doing a
Oh,
tremendous
many
service,
years.
not just for Radnor, but for kids in this entire region.
And he does it totally for free. You can't even hire him. He does it out of the goodness of his heart and the passion that he has, and goes over every single thing about the college admissions process. Yeah, it's wonderful. So thank you.
It's all good. Yeah.
Debbie, I will add that I was there for 3 or 4 of them, and he was unbelievably good. And I had no idea that Paige sponsored him until it was announced at a meeting. So Thank you. It was worthwhile.
Our pleasure.
So on the staffing and all of that stuff, I mean, I'll just comment, and then I don't know if Mr. Batchelor wants to comment. But at our committee of the whole meeting, we will be hearing about staffing and recommendations from the administration related to staffing around the district as it ties into our budgeting process. And that'll be at our meeting prior to the next board meeting at the end of this month.
Correct. Next week. So right? It's next Tuesday.
Yeah, it's next week already.
Yeah, it's next week already. So yes, Tuesday, but the high school administration, middle school administration, representatives from the elementary level will be there as well to talk about, what is the status of our staffing right now. And we will also include in that in a discussion of what were some of the cuts that were made last year and what has been the impact of those cuts.
And I think the other question was class sizes in the budget for next year.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll
It's all
also,
part of the
It's all part of it,
staffing
yes.
discussion.
okay.
Yeah.
So we'll hear a report of what the cuts did, and we'll also hear what we're going to be able to maintain for next year.
Correct. And you'll actually see the actual class sizes that ran this year, and then the board will see some of the preliminary numbers for what we're looking at for next year as well with class sizes.
All right, great. Is there any other public comment? Hello,
Roberta Winters, 326 Williams Road. I'd like to ask for a couple of clarifications. I believe that meeting that Ms. Singer mentioned was May 10th. I think she said March. It's May 10th, right? Okay. And second,
I didn't catch that.
believe that it's, I would like you to restate when the meeting is, when you're going to have the committee of the whole talking about staffing. Is that next Tuesday, you said?
Tuesday at 5.
No, the meeting is at 6 o'clock. There is the exec session we moved to beforehand. So the meeting will be for the entire board at 6 o'clock at the township building. Then we have our normal board meeting beginning at 7 o'clock. The meeting at 6 o'clock will begin with what we're calling a budget workshop, but it'll be an opportunity as a part of that to talk about our current class sizes and our staffing. And also, when we look at staffing, it'll also be a report on, staffing, not just when it comes to our faculty, but all aspects of our staffing, K-12 in each of our buildings.
Which is something we said we want to do on an annual basis, regardless of budget. This is just a mechanism for us to understand the operations of the district
Correct.
in a more detailed orientation so that we don't have to ask all the questions.
Right.
That the admin's actually coming to us with the data.
Yes, and it's something that we want to establish that we do yearly, and I would probably recommend, we'll see how it goes in the future, but that we even, do it at a different time. So, it'd probably be more advantageous if we were doing it in October, November time period.
For sure.
It gives us a little bit more time to digest things, because this presentation is not only setting the foundation for future years how we do this, but also, it is also an opportunity to look at what ran this year, what actually did take place.
Thank you. I think it's important for the public to know that, particularly parents who are concerned about their children and class sizes. I'm also delighted to hear from Dr. McGuigan this evening about the book that you're all going to share about innovators' mindset. I think that's really important because I think in the last decade there's been a lot of education emphasis on testing and getting right answers, and I think we need to look a little bit more innovatively at education for the children's sake as well as the teachers. Also, I will be anxious to hear about the bell schedule at the middle school next month, and I hope you will be taking into account that the American Academy of Sleep Medicine has also reinforced the later school start time because of the importance of having students ready to learn when they go to school, and I think having classes that start later in the morning will be more productive for the students, and continuing to perhaps reinstate the more homeroom type of atmosphere at the beginning of the day would be more productive in the long haul. And again, we commend the librarians throughout the district for their great work, and hopefully we'll continue to hear more good things. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta.
Good afternoon.
Hello,
Cindy
Cindy.
Spurtle, 106 Valley Forge Terrace, Wayne. I'm glad that Dr. Winder spoke about the later openings. I had heard a comment just the other day that if we can't go with later openings, maybe we need a nap time at school because the students are having a hard time of it. Tonight, we're going to hear from Dr. Murray about how the first year of Math in Focus has been going, and which will be great to have an evaluation at the end of the first year, which we have not received yet for full-day kindergarten. So once again, I would like to bring that up, not only costs, but how the students are, differences if there are any, if there are none, as they move into first and second grade. And I believe, if I remember correctly, we're at the end of the third year for full-day kindergarten, if that's the case. Second and third grade seem to be a benchmark as to whether or not there were any differences in comments that I'd heard the year that it was implemented. And also, as we're talking curriculum and making plans for next year, Mandarin seems to have fallen along the wayside, and I know there was enthusiasm and interest expressed by staff as well as because we already had a teacher ready, and then when the cuts came, there were changes that were made. And what are the plans for next year? Will Mandarin be offered, and even moving it into the middle school where students seem to pick languages up a lot better? And another question is looking at thinking about curriculum. There were several issues that were brought up by both parents and teachers and students about math placement in the middle school, and have those issues been resolved? It's a question that I had. Just a couple on the presentation that we're going to, or the evaluation. On the slides, reviewing the slides for the Math in Focus, I noticed that there's a summer institute, and there are 7 teachers / administrators who will be attending. Now, were those volunteers, or were they chosen or assigned to go to those seminars? And I also, that the parents and the community have been, parents and community outreach program through the year with the Math in Focus, and noticed that for PTO meetings, that Radnor PTO had not been included on the list, and I'm wondering whether or not there had been a meeting there, and if not, why not? And I'm looking forward to further explanation on the instructional successes and focus areas, and I'm sure that Dr. Murray will be giving us those. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no other public comment, let's move on to the approval of the March 21st, 2017 minutes. You want to take over?
Sure. March 28th.
21st.
21st. I'm reading the wrong quote. Maybe I took over too soon. Any corrections or comments?
I wasn't here, so I can't.
All right, good. All right. We'll assume they are approved. Thank you very much for taking over. I was somewhat unavoidably detained. All right, agenda item number 1. Are we ready?
Yes, we are ready. So
Very good. Edternship and Edventurist programs at Radnor Senior High.
Oh, we're just not, we don't have that today. We're moving to this.
All right.
yeah, we rescheduled that for next month. So we're going to move right on to Dr. Murray, who's ready to give us an update on
I'm done.
Math in Focus.
We'll go with agenda item 2.
Failure.
I said we should say we already did it.
It was great. It was awesome. I missed best presentation.
All right, Math in Focus update. Kelly, you're on.
Thank you for having me speak tonight. It's really exciting to be presenting now, sharing with what seemed to be a long time in planning to get to this point, and just reflecting on the first year of implementation. So during this presentation, I'm going to start off with an overview, a brief overview of what brought us to this point, and just what some of the years, the implementation years, looked like, so that we can just remind us some of the steps that we took to bring us to this point. I am going to focus on some of the instructional successes that we've seen this year, and then as well as the focus areas and what we're looking at for next year and subsequent years. And we are definitely looking at doing an evaluation of the program when we get some more data as we progress, and we look forward to being able to present that as well. And then I'm also going to share some resources that we have for families moving forward. So looking back in 2014-15, I'm not going to read all of this to you, but I'm just going to highlight some of the focus areas. The year of 2014-15 was our year of audit, where we really took a deep look at the program that we were currently using, the data that we had, the feedback that we're receiving from the community, from our families, from our teachers, and compiled all of that to come to a final recommendation in May of 2015. Some of the data that we looked at was a parent survey, teacher survey. We also conducted a parent and community forum, thanks to League of Women Voters for their support in helping organize that, with really the intention of trying to gather as much objective information as we can about the success of our current math program and also the shortcomings. Really trying to determine what were our needs and how we can make sure moving forward that we were going to select a program that would best match those needs and whether or not we needed to change. Through that process, we worked very closely with vertical teams, K-12, to evaluate several resources, and over the course of the year, we did narrow down our resources, obviously, to Math and Focus, and we were happy to have made that, the presentation in May of 2015 for adoption. Shortly after the elementary came on board, the middle school purposefully delayed their decision to really determine what elementary was going to do. And once elementary decided to move forward with Math and Focus, the middle school jumped on shortly thereafter as well. So moving into the year of 2015-16, this was really our year of planning. We purposefully made the recommendation to delay the implementation to this year so that we had a year to really focus on the systems and the processes that we had in place to make sure that it was well thought through and rolled out appropriately to try and minimize the bumps. We know that with the implementation of any new program, particularly when you go K-8 with a program, that you can anticipate some speed bumps along the way, and we wanted to make sure that we tried to anticipate them as much as we could and be proactive in addressing them. So you'll see here in the year of 2015, we really focused on the different process that we had in place and the different systems. Some of the systems that we did make adjustments to and really evaluate was our K-12 course progression. We wanted to make sure that, again, even coming out of middle school, we want to look at the impact that would have on the high school courses as well. We took a very careful look at our grouping practices and CCFG, and we did decide, based on the recommendations of Math and Focus, that Math and Focus did not support the grouping practices, so we did put a hold on that so that we could really take a better look at reevaluating that once we understood Math and Focus a little bit clearer. We did identify with our course progression the evidence of mastery process, which assists in course placement and with the acceleration process. And we just recently proposed the new update to Algebra 1 and the Algebra 1 readiness, making sure that Algebra 1 was still very accessible to students. And we've seen a lot of success with the prep programs that we've had so far, and we're looking forward to the students who are preparing for the Algebra 1 readiness assessment to be taking that in May very shortly. And then finally, we also looked at tiered levels of enrichment, just again making sure that students are receiving the appropriate level of challenge and enrichment as needed. We were very thankful to the board for your support in the very robust professional development program that we proposed. In the year 2015-16, we started with our professional development, even though we weren't yet implementing, so that we could make sure, again, that our teachers felt comfortable, well, as comfortable as you can moving into a new program. And so you can see we did do quite a large amount of professional development in 2015-16. Again, this is prior to implementation. We focused on everyday counts professional development, which is a component of Math and Focus. We did some front-loading with bar model training, so that, again, one of the major instructional strategies. We also conducted quite a few site visits. We had several districts in the area who were very welcoming to us. I met with their administration several times. They opened their door to us to come in and see lessons, and it was just a really great opportunity for our teachers to be able to debrief and talk with teachers and see some of the challenges. And again, it helped us with the anticipation of what we may see during our implementation year. And then 2016-17, we have our official professional development series where you can see we've had quite a robust professional development plan taking full advantage of the professional development days that were worked into the calendar for our K-8 training. It really, I think, was a great opportunity for teachers to be able to meet frequently and to debrief and to talk with math and focus specialists. And the professional development was well spaced out, so we had different sessions based on where they were within the curriculum. One of the things that you'll notice moving into February 17th, we started the professional development very heavily focused on grade level professional development, but then we started to do some evaluations and collect feedback and break those up based on needs of teachers. So you'll see February 17th, we had a half-a-day grade level, and then we moved into half-a-day breakout sessions, again, based on the needs of the teachers. We definitely saw some areas rising, and we tried to tailor, again, the professional development to their needs. And then in March, we also had demo lessons where a math and focus consultant came, taught a lesson to our students with our teachers, and we had the opportunity to debrief with the consultant and, again, really look at how the lesson was taught and do a nice lesson study with that. So we are looking forward to doing more demo lessons in the future. We will be wrapping up our professional development series this year on May 16th, again with a half-a-day grade level, and then moving into breakout sessions based on need in the afternoon as well.
Can I ask a
Sure.
question while you're on that page? On the demo lesson day, having never taught a class before, I'm just kind of curious. How valuable is that across multiple lessons, or is it very specific to a lesson, or is it really generalized so that the teachers are learning a lot more than just what that particular subject is for that class?
It was very specific to that lesson. What we did was we identified, we split the grade level up, so we had half the grade level come in the morning, half of the grade level come in the afternoon, and identified which lesson the teacher was going to be at in the curriculum, and that was the lesson that the math and focus consultant taught. They started for an hour first by planning with the teachers and walked through the planning process, walked through how that lesson, how the consultant really planned and prepared for the lesson, and then they went into the classroom and they taught that lesson live to our students, and it was exactly where our teacher was within the curriculum.
But with regards to what the teachers get out of that type of a session, it's more generalized in terms of the plan, like how you go about teaching a lesson related, not necessarily that one particular lesson. Otherwise, we'd have to have demo days on every single lesson.
Right. The debrief after was definitely generalized to how can you apply this to planning any lesson. The strategies that Math and Focus uses really transcend any of the lessons, and they were really focusing on the level of questioning that the presenter was using, the strategies, how they were breaking up the lesson, which could transcend any of the lessons. It wasn't necessarily content specific. It was really focused on those strategies. Math and Focus really emphasizes an approach called CPA, concrete to pictorial to abstract. And in the debrief, they looked at how was that progression evident, whether or not we were looking at a kindergarten classroom or a secondary 8th grade classroom. We should have been able to see evidence of that CPA approach across the lesson. So those strategies would definitely transcend any of the lessons. And again, the modeling and the approaches to planning would be applicable to any lesson.
And is there a component in that about how the kids receive the information?
What do you mean?
So at the end of the lesson, is there some sort of feedback from the kids about how they receive, so that you can really get a sense of using this methodology, the kids have a better opportunity to receive the information more clearly or whatever, that it helps to benefit the educational aspect of it, more than just, okay, here's a method for how to do it, but what's the real benefit of it?
That's a great question. We didn't have any mechanism of collecting the student feedback. We did focus heavily on the debrief of the teachers, but that's something I can look into for the future of incorporating.
Just be curious, right? Because the end result is that the kids receive it.
Absolutely.
And they get more out of it by teaching it with that method. I'd be curious to understand.
Absolutely.
That part.
That's something I'll definitely look into because we are hoping to do more demo lessons moving into next year. And I heard a lot of positive feedback from teachers about the approach and this style of professional development, that it was real. It was not a, sit and deliver professional development. It was in the classroom with the students.
And and I think that's hugely beneficial. I'm just curious to understand a little bit more. Thanks.
Sure. So overall, for our professional development to this point, our teachers have received a minimum of 45 hours of professional development by the end of this year. There were also some additional professional development opportunities. Haverford hosted a professional development, a 12-hour session last summer, and was gracious and invited our teachers to attend, and we did have several who attended that. Again, we mentioned site visits earlier. In the end, we had 29 teachers attend site visits to various districts in the area, and 7 administrators attended. So our overall professional development to this point is approximately 45 to 63 hours per teacher. So each teacher has had a minimum of 45 hours.
And what was the goal
Of the professional development.
for this? Because I know it's phased, so what was the goal for this year? Did we reach the goal?
The goal of this year's professional development was really to focus on the implementation and the instructional strategies. Which strategies are unique to Math and Focus, and why do those strategies work? Math and Focus it requires a little bit different approach, especially in some scenarios and some strategies. So it was really to focus on how you can use those strategies to emphasize the concepts. Again, focusing on bar modeling, the CPA approach are two of the major topics. Moving into next year, we're going to be focusing heavily on differentiated instruction.
So you feel like you reached the goal?
I do.
Not just in hours, but the quality of the professional development.
I do. I think over the last several months with the last few professional development sessions we've had, I feel like we've been able to really tailor the sessions to meet their needs. I sent out a survey to teachers prior to the PD session and listed a set of topics, and they ranged anywhere from helping navigate through the language-rich aspect of Math and Focus, or differentiate instruction, or accelerating enrichment for for providing more challenge and rigor. And we used the results of that survey to determine which sessions would be given, so that it was very specific to the teacher's needs. And I think as we moved into that type of professional development, it was much more applicable to the teachers. The beginning few sessions was really focused on just navigating the program. How to use the teacher manuals, how to use these strategies. Once we got past that, I think we started to dig deeper into it and saw a little bit more of what we were hoping to see out of our professional development program.
Is that the last, I didn't pre-read, so is that the last portion on professional development?
No, there's another slide
There's one
here.
more slide. I'm going to talk about the future professional development, and then I'll
wait.
also
Okay.
talk about some of our challenges that we've seen this year and how we're planning on supporting that with professional development as well.
I'll hold my other questions then. Thanks.
So moving into next year, we do have the opportunity to attend the Math and Focus Summer Institute. I attended it several years ago, and it was excellent. Based on the amount of districts in the area that are using Math and Focus, they did decide to hold it in Philadelphia this year. I did open it up to all teachers, K to 8, and I sent an email out and asked for volunteers to attend that session. So at this point, we do have seven teachers and administrators who have confirmed attending. So I didn't necessarily select them. It's based on, again, it's held during the summer, so many are working around their schedules. But it was made available to all teachers K to 8. We also have, moving into next year, several sessions that are set up. November 6th will be one of those days that will be very tailored towards the needs of the teachers. Again, I'll send out a survey and gather feedback from teachers so that those sessions are very specific to their needs. November 7th, we'll be looking at meeting with vertical team members to, again, look at the curriculum and make sure that we're progressing students appropriately. April 7th, and then also looking at demo lessons, which will likely occur in the fall and the winter or spring, again, using the same model, and bringing in a consultant to help lead those as well. This year we did do, over the last few years rather, we did do quite an extensive parent and community outreach program. We started with parent information sessions, which you'll see the dates there, and then we also had parent universities spread throughout the year. They were really a great opportunity to be able to have, we teamed them up with our professional development days. They tended to happen the evening before we had a professional development session, which I have heard mixed reviews on that it was difficult for some families to attend them because it was the evening before the students head off. The reason why we did that is because we received a drastic discount, because then you wouldn't have to have the consultant coming back out for just a few hour sessions in the evening. But I did meet with, as we mentioned earlier, with the PTOs and receive some feedback on that as well. So we're looking at planning some future parent university sessions and looking at taking some of that feedback and being able to adjust those to meet, again, the family needs as well. I held 2 PTO meetings. These started actually because the PTO coordinator at Wayne reached out to me and said that they had been hearing some feedback from Wayne families, and wanted to know if I'd be interested in coming and speaking with them. It was a really great session, and that occurred at the end of March. So from there, I reached out to Ithen and Radnor to see if they were interested in hosting the same thing. And as you can see, we just had our Ithen session, and I am hoping to still plan a Radnor session as well. But it was a really nice opportunity just to sit and talk and hear the feedback and hear, again, what they're seeing as successes and what they're seeing as challenges as well at home. And then we've also had 2 Partners for STEM meetings as well, where we've debriefed on the implementation there as well. So moving into what we're seeing this year as some of our instructional successes, we've absolutely seen an increase in multi-step problem solving and critical thinking skills. Students are spending more time on fewer questions and absolutely going deeper into those questions. And again, we'll see even at a kindergarten level, multi-step problem solving at an early age. And really the idea of building algebra readiness, we've seen evidence of that in kindergarten. In addition, we've seen an increase in students' ability to find entry points into problems. Students just being able to sit and think and build some of that stamina to really approach a problem. And again, that's one of the focus areas of Math in Focus to let students have that productive struggle. Let them think on a problem and use a terminology that maybe a student might not get it now or yet, but focusing on that growth and being able to grow students. We've also seen an increased exposure to more challenging and rigorous grade level program, which is one of the reasons why we adopted Math in Focus. And we are seeing that has definitely come true as we are seeing more students on grade level being challenged, which is resulting in a decreased need across the board for acceleration. And we have focused on the use of manipulatives, which have helped students build a stronger concrete understanding. As I mentioned earlier, one of the pillars of Math in Focus is that CPA approach. And at all levels, you could see students working with manipulatives. And mastery is defined as moving away from the manipulatives and into the pictorial realm, but the use of manipulatives is helping students to build a little bit more of a concrete foundation. We have seen the language-rich aspect of the program really challenge students and push students to comprehend and analyze the text. But I noted here, this is also posing to be a challenge for us. We are finding the program to be very text-heavy and rich, which is a good thing, but I think our teachers and our communities definitely, it takes an adjustment just to realize that the strategies that you're using in ELA also apply to math, and we're definitely trying to look at making those connections, that you're not doing math in isolation and then you put those strategies away, and same thing with ELA. Those strategies apply, close reading, text, and so on. But this is definitely one of the challenges that we've faced, and one of the professional development sessions that we've had this year, which was one of the more popular ones, was focusing on helping students navigate through that language-rich aspect. And I will say the feedback that I've heard from families is that this has been a challenge for them as well.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe at the end, or
Absolutely.
Is it now a good time?
I can focus on that now.
Tell me what that means.
So what we're seeing are word problems that are very complex in nature. They're not necessarily just a word problem where you can pick out one strategy and then move forward with that. It's a multi-step problem where you have to stop and think, what is this question even asking me first? And what is the end result of this? And then complete the algorithm or complete the concepts that are within that. And you may see an assessment question that covers 3 chapters worth of content. I was just looking at a 5th grade assessment where students were expected to be able to apply concepts from chapter 3, 4, and 6. 3 and 4 were focused on chapter 3 was focused on, I believe, adding fractions. Chapter 4 was focused on multiplying fractions, and I can't remember the following chapter, but you're doing multi-steps in different ways. Math in Focus has what they call novel questions, where they expect students to be able to use the concepts and apply them in a different scenario. And that's how they define mastery, with being able to apply those skills. But you see that with a program that is very language heavy, a lot of word problems and a lot of complex word problems.
So would it be appropriate to say it's building in a logic mastery as well as a straight mathematical mastery?
Absolutely.
So, okay, so that's good.
It's absolutely good. It's a positive step for us, but again, it's a challenge because it's different, and I think that's where our professional development comes in, to make sure that our teachers feel comfortable with these approaches, and then that transcends into the classroom. So it is a very good thing. I did identify it as an instructional success because it's a positive step, but it is it's a big leap with where we've been.
And it's a leap, too, because those novel questions are difficult.
Yes.
The question is novel length, or?
Yes.
They're difficult.
Yeah.
And it's a different approach, so the kids are going to struggle more.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. We're really excited about that. But again, you could see if at any level a child coming home and their assessments might be highlighted. You may see close reading strategies just to help them approach the problem and trying to identify what is this problem getting at first, and then come in with the strategies to solve the problem.
Got it. Thank you.
I have heard feedback, too, that, again, we're spending more time on fewer problems because the problems are so complex, and less time doing more of just the rote memorizations or fact type problems. So some of our focus areas that we've identified for this year, moving into the implementation, again, we did meet with several districts to try and anticipate as many of the problems or challenges as we could. I've been very happy with our implementation this year. I feel that our speed bumps, so to speak, have been minimal, but they still exist. There's still some challenges that we faced. The first, I would say the most common focus area that we've had is the assessments. We're finding the assessments to be exceptionally challenging and sometimes frustrate students. This goes back to that novel question. To some students, it may feel that when they hit that novel question, that it was a question they've never been taught. But what it's asking them to do is apply it in a different way. But again, that's a strategy that our teachers are trying to work through. We knew from the bat that this was going to be an anticipated concern. Every district we spoke to faced challenges with the assessments. Many of the districts...
Can I just break in? Do you think that's because we're making the change? Do you expect that will smooth out as time passes?
Absolutely. I think that our students will get used to the approaches, and they will get used to the expectations of these assessments, and I think they will rise. Many districts have made changes to the assessments. I've done a lot of digging into this and tried to get some feedback as to why and what their thoughts were. From my perspective, I think that keeping the assessments as they are is really important, because what we're saying is that we want, instead of lowering the bar to where the students will see success, we have to find the gap, find why are they not successful in those assessments, and address that instead of lowering the bar. So this is definitely one of our major focus areas that we're looking at, and we are having conversations, and the teachers are having conversations regularly about where they're seeing their students perform and how are they doing on those assessments and on the novel questions and the problem solving there.
Okay, thank you.
So for next steps in reference to that, we are looking at continuing to develop the curriculum, which will clearly articulate those learning targets. We have seen some gaps in instruction that, again, we knew was going to exist. Math in Focus has a transition guide which helps us through those, and we do have pre-tests for every unit, which helps us identify the prerequisite skills that students will need to be successful on that unit. So we have been focusing on using that. I do think over time, as students become familiar with the program and go through the trajectory, that will become minimized. The older the student is at this point, the more that they're going to feel these gaps now, because we did implement K-8. We do have rich data on student performance and very specific data on student performance. With every unit assessment, the teachers go back and do an item analysis, and each item on the assessment is aligned to a standard, which then gives us a report on how students are doing. So what that tells us is that not only can a student, it gives us an idea as to where the student's strengths and weaknesses are, and it's very specific to the skill. So it could show us that a student is very comfortable with adding and subtracting fractions, but maybe struggles with multiplying and dividing fractions. So we do have a lot of rich data, but one of the challenges is that it didn't translate well to the report card. We have put a Band-Aid on where our teachers are doing a calculator to help change it to the report card and report that. But as you know, we didn't report first marking period grades for elementary because we weren't comfortable with how that data was appearing and didn't feel like it reflected accurately. So
I don't know what that means.
So the way our tracker system worked, we have very specific data based on the student's performance by every assessment question. Mm-hmm. You could have an assessment question that was assessed, say, 30 times, and the student scored advanced on all 30 of those questions. And then you could have a separate standard that a student was assessed only once, and the student got that one wrong. The way the system computed it, it would take an average of that. We didn't feel like that was an accurate representation, so we worked out a system for that, an internal system for us to be able to report that a little more accurately, which was reflected on the last report card for elementary.
So weighted averaging, is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Yes.
And what, okay, that seems like it's a fairly straightforward fix. Is that our system, or is that Math and Focus's system?
It's the tracker system. Basically, the way, when the teachers go in and do an item analysis, the system of tracker computes it that way, and we did contact them to see if there was changes to that, and that's just the way the system is designed. And again, I think that we can still use the data that's presented there, but how it looks on the report card we feel might need to be adjusted.
Okay.
So for next steps with that, Dr. Rabarchek is going to, or has already started to lead a study on the report card to look at how we can make those adjustments. It's not that the data is accurate. The data that we have is absolutely accurate and, in fact, probably more specific than we've ever had. But it's just the translation from the two systems that they just don't mesh as well as we would like to, where we felt comfortable with it. So again, we came up with a system to work. But
is Tracker something we've purchased from a vendor?
We've had it for
8 years?
9 years.
Are they updating it, or do we have the 8-year-old model?
No, they're constantly updating it, and they do take our feedback, and we do use some of the components of Tracker in a more sophisticated way than a lot of districts do. Some people just use it to simply store straightforward grades and complete an average, but in many of our content areas, we use the standard alignment and pieces like that, and we do give some really specific information to parents. But remember, our report card was designed when we had a different math program. So, the standards have changed, the math program has changed, so it's time to adjust the report card so everything aligns.
I see. Okay, that's
a
helpful.
good next step. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Also focusing on the focus areas, I mentioned earlier, bless you, professional development, we definitely are looking at a need for an increased professional development on differentiated instruction within the classroom. So we are looking at having our year 2 professional development series focus very heavily on this. This is very typical of a year 1 implementation in debriefing with the consultant for Math and Focus who's been working with us from the beginning. She's also very happy with our progress with the program as well, but also feels that this would be the next step with moving forward. Another area that we're looking at is the pacing. The pacing is extremely aggressive. And with the implementation of this program, we had to really balance. We didn't want to push through just because the pacing told us we had to push through. And we wanted to be able to pause and reteach where we needed to reteach. And we carefully used the implementation guide to make sure that we filled in any gaps along the way. The pacing is an aspect that will, over time, correct itself because we will become more comfortable with the program, and we also know that those gaps will be minimized. So we are hoping that moving into next year, the pacing could move a little bit closer to on track. The other thing that we've also done too is take some of the content out and bumped it to the end of the year that was not critical. We've seen some chapters in some grade levels that are an entire grade level above. So we've reshifted that to the end of the year so that it's content that we can get to when we have time. But it's not critical content that if we miss this year, it's not going to create a long-term gap. We're also looking at using the end of this year to help help the process of communicating between those grade levels, so that again we can see which gaps would students be coming up with in reference to the program, and the gaps that the program might assume the students may have. But again, over time, I believe that would be minimized as well. But we are continuing to work with curriculum teams to look at the pacing guide. In fact, I'm meeting with second grade, a team from second grade tomorrow to look at that. And we are constantly talking about where we are in pacing, how do we make adjustments, how does that impact assessments, and so on this year. And then finally, I've heard this back with the PTO meetings as well, that families are struggling to help support students at home with some of these new approaches, such as bar modeling. Most of us didn't learn bar modeling when we learned these concepts, and our brains can go right to the algebraic equations. So we are looking at revisiting the parent universities and considering how we can revise those to maybe address more specific topics that we're seeing that come up. And creating instructional videos as well for some of those areas, such as bar modeling.
So is this, I'm sorry to keep
that's
interrupting,
okay.
but I just want to, because I don't have an elementary kid any longer, and I don't have grandchildren yet. So bar modeling, I heard you said something in there, because most of us go directly to the algebra. So this is some sort of an interim step between concept introduction and ability to go straight to the algebra.
Yes.
Now, is this a problem because do we have kids that are going straight to the algebra and don't need this and it's in the way, or can you flesh that out a bit?
Sure. So the bar model is basically a pictorial representation of a problem. It's getting students to understand and really think through a problem and what it's asking. So the students will literally draw bars, and there's several different models that you can use depending on what type of problem it is. And that's really a way for students to draw a pictorial representation of it. Now, what we like about Math in Focus is that the traditional algorithms are taught alongside the additional strategies. So one of the questions I've gotten from parents quite often is, if students are drawing pictures and bars, are they going to be 30 drawing, bar models?
I'd be worried about that.
It's a very valid question, but you'll see that those traditional algorithms are taught alongside it. And the idea is to move students from the pictorial realm to the abstract. The abstract is the traditional algorithm that we all know. So it helps build the concrete understanding. And the best example I can use is a fraction. If students, often we were taught the algorithm for fractions, but don't have the conceptual understanding of what's actually happening. Could we really draw out or understand what's happening when we divide fractions or multiply fractions? And students are going to focus on doing that using pictorial representation first, and then move to the algorithm with an understanding of why that algorithm works. The algorithms are taught as shortcuts now, they're important shortcuts. We want students to be able to not only solve problems, but solve them quickly and efficiently, and that's where the traditional algorithm comes in. So it is taught alongside and in tandem with the traditional with the pictorial representation. And what we're finding, again, that bar modeling is introduced in, I believe, second grade. And even some of the principles of bar modeling come in at first grade with number bonds. So as students progress through that, they will become more comfortable with it. But I think for adults, when we are not familiar with this approach,
I'm listening to the sidebar comments over here, and I'm trying really hard to.
Easy. She hates She hates doing the bar models. She hates it. She's like, oh, but she knows the math, so it's vital, even though it's hard. I mean, and I look at it and I'm like, I have no words. I have no idea how to help her with math at all. It's sad when you fail first grade math as an adult.
But the question is, you're not failing first grade math because you understand exactly where it's going. And so is this one of these, my question is really deeper, is this one of these situations where the help is more problematic than the goal?
Sometimes. And what we've also encouraged, we've encouraged teachers to tell parents too, if they struggle at home, just write a note and let the teacher know, and focus on homework that way instead of, feeling
screaming.
Like you said. Exactly.
We did that. It didn't go well.
Oh, the screaming?
The teacher was not happy.
But it hits math in different ways.
Yeah.
For the kids that are visual learners that can't get to the abstract right away, it gives them something to build on. It's supposed to build the structure underneath for better understanding.
Right.
We used to, when our kids, the math program that we had with our kids, right? Tell me you're thinking. They had no idea. I did it because 1 + 1 is 2. Like, what do you mean, tell me you're thinking? It gives them a way to express what else is going on underneath.
Right.
And it might feel weird in this first year, but I really, truly, I mean, honestly, if I had my way after seeing the way that it was taught, I would have had us go to every 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grader and make them do a summer regression to go back through it, because I think there's fundamental stuff that their kids are learning in this methodology that our other kids in the other math programs
Never
didn't get.
learned. Okay, all right. That's very helpful. I appreciate that timing on that explanation, because I want to avoid the impression that we've gotten yet another math program that's another version. I mean, when I was a kid, it was new math, and my father used to say, "What's the matter with the old math? I learned that." And I don't want to get into another situation where the parents are just getting frustrated and angry because they see us falling all over what's supposed to help, and it isn't helping, or at least isn't helping in their particular situation. That's a very helpful explanation. I think that's an important thing to get out there if parents are expressing frustration. Thank you. Sorry, didn't mean to keep interrupting.
It's a very good point, and again, I think it's one of the top feedback areas that have been brought up to me by parents, and so we are looking at trying to address that by having videos and parent universities to be proactive and address that, so we can show families at home how these strategies work, so we don't get to that point where they are just frustrated.
Right.
I think that emphasis on a deeper understanding is really critical to this program. I've seen this program implemented in my previous district. I've seen it from my students' perspective in where my kids go to school. And there's nothing watered down about this program. And that's something that is which is really exciting about the program, and the depth of level of understanding for our students. But it's like anything new. It's difficult, and we've got to do it right, and we've got to do it well.
Well, and I appreciate that too, because I have been in favor of this since day one. And so I want to make sure that if we are hitting some of the hurdles that sound a little too close to some of the ones we have experienced in the past with lesser programs, that we're clear that it's not the same thing.
No, it's definitely not. Having lived through the same math programs with my kids that you did, it is not the same.
Got it.
And
All right.
I think that there are some of these strategies that are introduced at younger ages where it does seem that it might just be quicker if you go to the traditional algorithm, and it may be. But what it's doing is building the understanding at an early age how to frame this methodology so that when you get a more complex ratio problem in 7th grade, we don't have to reteach the entire idea of bar modeling and then introduce those concepts. So it's building in pieces. So I do feel there are times maybe in some of the younger ages where we may say, let's just jump right to that algorithm. But it's looking at the long term, that long-term effect, and how that skill is going to be helpful down the road when you have more complex problems. And I mentioned earlier, too, the idea of having entry points into a problem. At least a student may not jump right to a bar model, but they may use that to begin drawing up pictorial representation, and then that might be the trigger to help them understand how to have another entry point to the problem.
I see. Okay, helpful. Thank you. Are you getting this, Janae?
She has learned a lot of math, but she understands it. And all the steps, I think, just reinforce that. It's just hard when you're looking at the problem and I'm like, I don't know what you're supposed to do. And the one night she had 4 problems. I'm like, oh, that'll take us, 10 minutes. It was 4 parts in each problem. And I was like, oh my gosh, when did math get so complicated? But she whipped through it. She understood it because I think she started in 1st grade shortly after they implemented. So she's had it from the beginning. So I have seen the building blocks. I'm curious. She takes PSSAs next week. So I'm curious as to how that will translate. But I think she knows more math than I probably will ever remember. I don't remember much at all because ours was just, here's the problem, here's the answer, you went on your merry way.
Plug and chug.
Right. So I feel like she's going to learn a lot and retain it longer than I ever would.
Interesting.
Agreed.
Yeah.
But it's still a little frustrating.
Yeah.
So we are looking at ways to address that, and if anybody has any suggestions, I've tried to put it out there that if anyone's saying, if only the district would give us this, as far as help and support, I would be willing to consider it and see what we can do, whether or not it's instructional videos on the website. And in a minute, I'm going to talk about some of the resources that are out there as well. The last focus area is certainly looking at standardized assessments, assessment results, and obviously that data is not in yet, but once we do receive them, which is anticipated in the summer, we will be doing an intensive review of the results. We'll be looking for pacing and content gaps, although we have clearly articulated the curriculum this year and have done a really deep analysis of that to make sure we got all of the critical content in on time. And we're going to look at the buildings will be using that data to break down further into student-specific data and really drive instructional decisions at that level as well. Again, just with any program, we may anticipate some dips there. We're hoping, of course, that it doesn't happen, and we have seen some really strong successes in the classroom that we're really happy to see, and the critical thinking that may not always be apparent on a standardized test. So we're hoping that we'll see those results this year, but it's something that we're definitely anticipating and looking at for the future.
Here's my question.
Sure.
So if we're having trouble, we know we're having trouble with the assessments, and if we see that is reflected in the standardized assessment, how is this going to impact math placement?
So the assessments that we use, the assessments that we use do not impact placement at all. So in elementary, we have end-of-unit assessments, which are not used for placement. So we made sure that any of these assessments were not placement assessments that would impact the student progression. There are some assessments that are used for placement, and we took a very careful look at them to make sure that they were not, they were designed in a way that would not impact the placement, if that makes sense. The only assessment that impacts student placement in math is the end of 5th grade assessment and the end of course 1 assessment. Any of the other end of unit assessments are not used at all for placement.
So how will you know if those assessments have been impacted by these midstream kids who just started the program? And we know that they're having trouble with the end of unit assessments. So it stands to reason there's a possibility that they're going to have trouble with the other assessments. So how do we make sure that not only do we remedy the situation, but these kids don't get, the short end of the stick who are entering the tracking system at just such an unfortunate time?
So I actually was meeting with a group of 5th grade teachers yesterday looking at the end of year assessment and what questions would be on there, and we compared it to the assessment questions that students had throughout the year. The 5th grade assessment is a culminating assessment, and it's designed that way, but the assessments that the publisher had were extremely long, so we did tailor them a little bit for that one single assessment, and we did make sure we did an analysis of what content was taught throughout the 5th grade courses, and we did an alignment to make sure we saw comparable questions and that we looked at how students performed on those questions, so that 5th grade assessment would be something that we knew that would help us appropriately. So the 5th grade end of year assessment is not the straight out of the book assessment.
Have all of our placement assessments changed, or are some of them still similar from previous years?
Most of them are similar from previous years. The only assessment that would be different would be the in the past, we did use the end of 5th grade assessment for placement, but it wasn't the same assessment because it was the old program assessment. So this is the new program assessment that we use for placement for 6th grade.
Because to get at your question would be, that would be interesting to look at some of that similar data, to see some of those placement assessments. And don't we use the IO in a place?
In an older grade, which wouldn't be impacted by these assessments.
Oh, okay. Because that would be interesting to see what is the difference between some of those placement tests of previous years, because we would hope with this program that we're actually seeing improvements.
Absolutely.
We're hoping that our students are actually scoring better on the placements.
Absolutely.
We would hope.
Please know, though, that that's something that we've already started to look at very carefully, because we don't, like you said, we don't want this to be an artificial barrier for students who could be successful. Again, the only one that is impacted by this is rising 6th graders who could be placed in either Course 1 or Course 1 honors. And then I believe it's rising 7th graders with Course 2 and Course 2-3. But again, we're taking a very close look at that to make sure that doesn't happen. So I'd like to wrap up by looking at some of the resources that are available for families. I have put several resources on the district website, and if you can follow this breadcrumb trail, if you go under departments, curriculum, and then mathematics, you'll see grade level specific pages, and on that page you can find scope and sequence documentation. You can get information about the Think Central activation, which is our online platform through Math and Focus. When you use the online platform, you can have access to instructional videos, parent videos. Also, any of the student resources are also posted there as well. You can also see units of study and very specific learning targets. The learning targets are one of the documentation pieces from our curriculum that show specific by unit what students should be able to know and be able to do by the end of each instructional unit within each grade. And then you'll also see parent support tutorials and videos by chapter. These are really nice videos. They're produced by Math and Focus, by the publisher, and it's, again, geared towards grade level and by chapter as well, so parents can see a preview of what's coming up and they highlight some of those strategies. And you'll also see, too, that there are some fact fluency and skill review resources there, as well as some instructional videos. Again, just to support students. I know I've had some families ask some resources that students can be using over the summer, and this is a great direction they can go to for some fact fluency resources. And then I mentioned the Think Central account. That is the online platform with Math and Focus that will help that students have their login that they can then get all the student resources there. So we are looking at expanding the resources for families. I am taking feedback as I meet with the different groups, just identifying what would help what would help families, what would help through this transition, and I am hoping to be able to get some more videos, parent universities, and so on available as well, so that we can help support it moving forward into next year. So with that is our implementation in a nutshell. Our last 3 years moving to this point. Again, I really have to congratulate the teachers because they've jumped in and they've put a lot of time, they've put a lot of support and just collaboration working together. The building administration has been fantastic in supporting them, and it's tough. It's tough to implement a new program, and I'm so proud of our teachers and our administrative staff for all the effort that they've put into making this successful and working through any of the challenges together. So I think we're in a really good place moving forward, and I look forward to next year.
So that's an interesting segue, because I had a question related to the teachers. We talk about the assessment for the kids, and with all the professional development that's offered, which is fine, but I'd like to understand a little bit more about what we're doing to assess the teachers individually in terms of their adoption, their ability to adopt it, and what are we doing to to make sure that there's equity across all the classrooms. Last thing we need is another one of those years where, parents open up the envelope and see that it's teacher X and, you get the moans and groans and everybody's complaining. Because we have to provide them the supports to make sure that they're successful. So I'm interested to understand what we're doing around that.
Sure. I think that the first thing that we have is our curriculum document, which gives a general pacing guide for our teachers, and I think that's one of the most useful resources because it gives, again, a window of where teachers should be. So we don't have one teacher who's 2 months ahead and one who's 2 months behind, and then in the end of the year, the student has large gaps based on which teacher they happen to have. So the pacing guide, I think, is one of the most useful documents for that. And we've had, the building principals have done a great job of creating time for all grade level teachers to meet together frequently throughout the year and from all the schools. So we can make sure that, again, they're in the same general place, they're getting the same kind of content, and they're able to talk through those lessons. So working in tandem with the pacing guide and having that time provided by the building administration has been pivotal in helping, again, just the accountability to where we are within the curriculum.
But is that a teacher self-assessment? Is this observational stuff that the principals are monitoring what's going on and making sure that everybody's pacing?
It's both, and I'm sure, Tranya, maybe you could talk about this more too.
But, yeah,
it would be very helpful.
Tranya, why don't you come up and just give us some from the principal's perspective.
Like to understand that.
I'm glad you said that. not from the horse's mouth, but from the teacher's perspective.
Tanya.
So I think a few things are happening, and a couple things that Kelly mentioned. Wow, that was a lot. But what things that we did, the principals got together this summer, and we planned for the sharing days. So we asked for release time so all of the grade level teachers could get together across the district. So all first grade met and had a half day to just talk about where they were and what they were doing and how they were handling problems as they came up. So that was really helpful. We've dedicated a good number of our faculty meetings to talking about collaborating around math and focus. And we've also, one of our goals, all of the elementary principals, was to have walkthroughs, which we always do, but to have them focus during math time. So I've been in more math lessons this year than I have other years, and it's really been helpful, especially to answer parent questions, because I would say in October, we had parents that were feeling like you were feeling, that just, we can't figure this out. You know, we have been through college and we know how to do math, and we cannot do this fourth grade problem. And we got a lot of emails like that. And we really worked through it with the teachers and even the students. I went into classes and said, so how many of your parents taught you algebra last night? And the children did this. And I said, did that help you do your homework? And the answer was no. So we really built a lot of capacity for our children and for their parents to understand that this is a work in progress, that this is a problem you're going to work at to solve it. So our walkthroughs have really looked at, are our teachers using the techniques that Math and Focus wants them to use? Are they asking the appropriate questions? Are they getting children to try different ways to solve the problem? So I think that's how we have looked for fidelity with the implementation from the teachers.
So, and that's all great and very helpful. And I don't need to know a precise answer, but you as the principal in the building then are looking at your teachers across the board, and based on your observations and everything that you're doing, you're sure that everybody's kind of moving at a similar pace, that we don't have any of these gaps, that there isn't one teacher who might need a little more help in this area or another teacher needs more help in that area. I'm trying to understand how we make sure that it's an equally delivered educational program, regardless of which teacher it is. I know there's individual teachers and individual methods, and I'm not saying we have to all be lockstep, but as the principal, you guys need to know, right, that it's...
Right, and I think we know that because of the walkthroughs and being familiar with what we expect to see. And so I typically would walk through all of fourth grade in one day because I know what the lesson should look like.
Okay.
The next day I might do all of second grade.
Okay.
And because they plan together, there isn't the opportunity for one teacher to be 3 weeks behind.
Okay.
They plan together. They may be a day ahead or 2 days apart. And I think that helps with our pacing guide and also with the teachers meeting across grade levels throughout the year across the district.
Okay.
So in other words, you can't...
There should not be a huge disparity from this one to that one. Okay.
Absolutely not.
And that's what I was interested to understand. Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
And I would just add, too, I mean, you know, what we monitor gets done. You know, one of the sessions I attended was one of the model, when we had the Math and Focus teacher here working with a group of teachers, and I attended that session and was impressed to see other building administrators there as well stopping in and to see, you know, the emphasis that is being placed on this implementation. And I think that's a piece of it as well, is that there's a clear emphasis on it. And the model lesson example has not only been great just for implementing this math program, but it's also a good discussion about how often are we doing that as an organization,
Right.
you know, as educators, giving that opportunity for that collaboration for everyone to look and see. And this is, you know, the aspects of a strong lesson. So I think that's also helped, you know, raise the game, not just in math instruction, but across the board, doing more of that.
Thank you.
So I take a little bit of a different take on that because I think when you're implementing a new math curriculum, you are going to have certain teachers that are going to get it a lot quicker than others. That is just reality. So I think some unevenness is to be expected, and that was one of my concerns about making this change, is we have to make sure it's worth what we're going to have to put in to make sure this, you know, is successful. I think we've done a tremendous amount of in-service. I mean, I know I was sitting here for all of those, but when I look at how much in service we've given teachers, I mean, that is tremendous amount of support. So my question is, so we're going to have turnover in teacher staff. So what happens when you get a new third grade teacher next year who has not had this background of 45 hours of how to teach this? How difficult is it going to be to get that person up to speed on this?
So we have a few plans in place. We do have a new teacher training scheduled for the fall so that we can immediately address that. This is actually an issue that I've talked about with other curriculum supervisors in other districts. And one of the issues that we faced with math, everyday math previously, when we looked at the training of our teachers and how many teachers were there for the initial training, it was pretty evident to us that we needed to focus on how we are continuing the professional development. So we do have a professional development session scheduled specifically for new teachers. But moving forward to some of the supervisors of local districts, we've been talking about ways that maybe we can team, because we're in the same boat. We're all faced with, you have one or two teacher who needs training, and you can't possibly give them the 45 hours of training in one shot, but maybe if we can find ways to partner with some of the other districts to be able to offer sessions that way, that's an option. We've also spoken with the IU as well and expressed this as one of our needs, and saying that many of the districts in the area are using Math in Focus, and this is an ongoing issue for us. There's also opportunities such as the summer institutes that are being offered, which might be a way to do that as well. We also have our induction program that Jim leads, and that might be some ways that we can get some of that professional development, and I know that there's also a mentoring program with that. And finally, we also have our STEM coach as well, who's been adding support as well. So I think in tandem, it is an area that over time I feel we can't lose focus of, and I think it's something that can easily kind of be swept aside when you're looking at maybe just one or two teachers. But it is a unique program, and it's a program that I said to you when we first proposed this, it rests on professional development. So we have to be able to have a plan B in place for those. Obviously we hope we don't lose our teachers, but we need to have a plan B in place for any new teacher that comes in. So it is something that we've already started to look at.
But we're by no means the first to introduce this, and there are plenty of teachers out there who have the experience already from their home districts or from their departing districts. So I would hope that's actually an element in our hiring thought process too, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It should be.
Yeah, I mean, Math in Focus, highly desirable, if not essential. Right. Yeah.
So my next comment is going to sound completely contradictory, but I also don't want this to take over everything else we do. I mean, we do a heck of a lot already in the elementary school. This is just one component, and we have put a huge focus on this to get this up and running and get everybody ready, but I don't want this to take over everything else we do. You've got to be able to do that, or you can't come to Radnor and this is what we do professional development for, and this is going to take over, and now you're in induction sessions. I mean, I don't want to see that. I want it to all be in balance with its proper priority. So that's just my opinion.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Kelly, I think this was very helpful. I'm very glad that we did this. Maureen, this was a good idea.
And actually, if I could make a plug, could we use that presentation as a model and do the same thing for kindergarten? I mean, it has been several years. We have not done a similar kind of rear view mirror. What have we done? What's the process? Where are we? What's working? What can be better? It was a significant investment, as much, if not more, than Math in Focus.
Yep. And I think we as a board, we need to discuss that concept of what areas we want to do program evaluation for, and I think that's a discussion we have coming up, that we need to identify what are those areas we'd like to do that for.
Absolutely. Yeah. But this was very informative and good, and my hope is that parents will get more comfortable, and the kids will do better, and the teachers will like it.
And I just want-
That's a win. Win, win, win.
And I just like to thank not only Kelly, but the whole curriculum department, because this is, it is any implementation of any new curricular area is a great deal of work, but especially in this area, no matter what district you're in, but this is a huge undertaking. So I appreciate all the work that they have done, and then also the commitment to really see it through with the continual professional development, which is great.
And further recognizing there was new science too, so it was a lot.
And I have to say, I attended one of your sessions, I think the July one over the summer. I mean, really, you guys need to know how hard Dr. Murray worked to pull this off, to, just be patient with people, answer questions from parents. They were shooting everything at you, and she handled it beautifully. So just really thank you so much.
All right. Wait.
Public comment.
Public comment. Okay. Public comment.
I also applaud Dr. Murray for all the hard work she's been doing. And I just have a question based on my experience in working with students in a variety of math programs over the years. And I have found that in instances where they have become language embedded in a way, that many of our students, particularly those who have a language processing problem or those who come to us not speaking English as a primary language, can get very, very frustrated. And in fact, it's been my experience that sometimes the only place they were successful in school was mathematics. And I would hope we would find some way in which we might make sure those children who have a problem with language do not feel they cannot do mathematics, because I think it's a very, very hard lesson to learn as a very young person, that you can go to school all day and not be able to do much of anything that you feel comfortable doing. So please consider that as you move forward.
Actually, not to interrupt public comment, but that is an interesting point. How are we addressing that right now?
So
Sorry, Cindy.
I think it comes down to the strategies that we use to help students use like close reading strategies. Many of the strategies that we would use in an ELA program apply to math as well. I mentioned earlier, it's so important that we don't see math as just a pocket. And you learn math at this time, or science for that matter. You close it and then you move on, and now I'm using my ELA strategies. The same strategies that we would use in any of our content areas certainly apply to math. And I think what we're just seeing now is the increased emphasis to be able to do that. But again, going back to the professional development, one of our sessions was absolutely focused on helping teachers help students navigate through the language-rich aspect.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, it was a good point. Thank you for sharing that. Cindy?
Thank you, Dr. Murray. That was very informational. One quick question. You've presented now 4, and there will be a 5th parent university, and I'm just curious how well attended they were.
If I'm remembering correctly, the first, they're all blending together now. One of them was held in this room, and it was almost to capacity, and we did stream that that session. I would have loved to have recorded it, but the consultant doesn't allow us to because of copyright. The last one was not as well attended, but I believe it was because it was on a holiday weekend or coming close. I can't remember the exact dates now. But the first several were very well attended. The
Okay,
last
good.
one was not as well.
Because you've obviously reached out, but the parents were thrilled when they found out that this was coming to Radnor, and I'm just hoping that they're taking advantage of the opportunities that you are giving them, and they'll be continuing again next year, I presume?
Yes, yes. I believe the last session, I want to say, had about 30. Do you remember?
It was in a big room, so I think it was.
That was at the middle school.
I think it was about
that was a good
30, and that was probably the smallest of the groups so far. But like I said, the first one we were at capacity in here.
All right. Any further? All right. Class dismissed.